Cooking is a careful dance between heat and time. At one end, heat unlocks aromas, deepens flavors, and transforms raw ingredients into something comforting and rich. At the other end, that same heat can push food past its breaking point. Bread turns black, sugar smokes, meat hardens, and suddenly the flavor shifts from savory or sweet to harsh and unpleasant. That sharp, lingering bitterness is one of the clearest signs that food has been burnt. Understanding why burnt food tastes bitter means looking closely at what heat does to molecules, how the tongue interprets bitterness, and why the human body is especially sensitive to that flavor. Right here on History of Simple Things. Bitterness is one of the basic taste sensations, alongside sweet, salty, sour, and umami. Unlike sweetness, which often signals energy-rich foods, bitterness evolved as a warning system. Many naturally toxic compounds in plants taste bitter, so the human palate became finely tuned to detect even small amounts of it. Because of this sensitivity, bitterness tends to dominate other flavors once it appears. When food burns, chemical changes create compounds that trigger those same bitterness receptors, effectively setting off an internal alarm that something may be wrong with what is being eaten. Cooking is chemistry in motion. When food is exposed to heat, molecules vibrate faster, bonds break, and new compounds form. At moderate temperatures, these reactions are usually desirable. Proteins denature, starches gelatinize, and sugars caramelize. But heat does not stop working once food is cooked. As temperatures climb higher and exposure continues, the reactions shift from constructive to destructive. Nutrients degrade, complex molecules break into harsher fragments, and new substances appear that were never meant to exist in edible food. One of the most celebrated processes in cooking is the Maillard reaction. This reaction occurs when amino acids from proteins react with reducing sugars under heat. It is responsible for the golden crust on bread, the browned surface of meat, and the deep savory notes in roasted coffee and chocolate. Early and mid-stage, Maillard reactions create hundreds of flavorful compounds that smell nutty, meaty, and warm. However, the Maillard reaction does not have a natural stopping point. When pushed too far, it continues to generate darker pigments and increasingly bitter-tasting molecules. At this stage, pleasant browning gives way to scorching, and complexity turns into harshness. Burning happens when food is exposed to temperatures high enough to cause pyrolysis, the thermal decomposition of organic material. During pyrolysis, large molecules such as carbohydrates, fats, and proteins break apart without the presence of oxygen. This process produces char, smoke, and a wide range of small, unstable compounds. Many of these compounds taste bitter or acrid. Once charring begins, the balance of flavor tips rapidly. Sweetness and umami vanish, replaced by bitterness that coats the tongue and lingers long after swallowing. As food burns, carbon becomes more concentrated. Carbonization is the process by which organic matter is reduced largely to carbon through intense heating. Charred food contains microscopic carbon-rich structures and polycyclic compounds that contribute to bitterness. These compounds interact strongly with taste receptors, producing a dry, ashy sensation. The more thoroughly food is carbonized, the more pronounced this bitterness becomes. This is why lightly toasted bread can still taste pleasant, while blackened toast tastes overwhelmingly bitter. Sugar is often associated with sweetness, but it can become one of the strongest sources of bitterness when overheated. As sugar heats, it first melts and caramelizes, forming complex, sweet, and slightly bitter flavors that are prized in desserts. If heating continues, caramelization progresses into decomposition. Sugars break down into smaller molecules such as acrolein and other aldehydes which have sharp, unpleasant tastes and smells. Once sugar burns, sweetness collapses entirely, replaced by bitterness and a stinging sensation that can feel almost chemical. Fats also undergo dramatic changes when burned. At moderate temperatures, fats contribute richness and carry flavor. When overheated beyond their smoke point, fats begin to break down into free fatty acids and volatile compounds. Some of these compounds taste bitter and irritating. Burnt oils often produce a biting, unpleasant flavor that clings to food. This is especially noticeable in fried foods, where oil has been overheated or reused too many times, allowing degradation products to accumulate. Proteins are long chains of amino acids, and heat causes them to unravel and react. In controlled cooking, this creates tender textures and savory flavors. Under excessive heat, proteins fragment into smaller peptides and amino acid derivatives that can taste bitter. Some amino acids themselves, when altered by heat, produce distinctly bitter compounds. This is why severely burnt meat does not just taste smoky, but also sharp and unpleasant, even when salt or sauce is added. Burning food releases smoke filled with volatile organic compounds. Some of these compounds settle back onto the food surface. Phenols, cresols, and other smoke-derived chemicals can add complexity in small amounts, as seen in smoked foods. When concentration becomes too high, these same compounds taste bitter and medicinal. Ash particles can also cling to food, adding a dry, chalky bitterness that overwhelms other flavors. Burnt food tastes bitter because heat pushes cooking chemistry beyond its sweet spot. Sugars decompose, proteins fragment, fats break down, and carbon-rich compounds accumulate. All of these changes create molecules that strongly activate bitterness receptors, overpowering pleasant flavors and lingering on the palate. What begins as browning and depth ends as a chemical warning sign. The difference between delicious and bitter often comes down to seconds, degrees, and attention. In that narrow space between caramelization and carbonization, flavor lives or dies, and bitterness waits patiently on the other side. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.